with my introduction. My name is Sven Bettendorf, and as you mentioned, I'm working at the TÜV Information Technology in Germany, and we are one of the only labs that doing really all certifications, all evaluations on hardware, software, anything you can think of that needs some kind of testing. Oh, there's the slides. Is changing in the future due to quantum computers. There will be algorithms that break the cryptography that is used today. So in the next 10 to 15 years, there will be quantum computers capable of breaking half of the security algorithms that are used right now. So we need a change anyway. So it's not only space that requires new security system, but also classical cryptography is changing in the next few years completely. Before I go into more detail about these topics, I'm going to introduce a little bit about the TÜV Nord Group. So the TÜV Nord Group is one of the largest providers in testing and evaluation in Germany. We have different business fields. In total, there are 6 different business fields. And we are part of the digital and semiconductor business fields. So we are partnering with 2 different companies there. One is the Alta Technologies, and the second one is HTV. They are doing some storing of microprocessors while we're doing the certification in cybersecurity, or the evaluation especially. And Alta Technology is doing some space requirements testing. The next slide, here's a little bit about an overview what Alta is doing, Alta Technology is doing on the left. So they are doing component testing for space applications. So for every component that is sent into space, there are technical requirements that they need to be fulfilled. And Alta is doing the testing on that. So they are doing component level from everything you can imagine, from ground station up to satellite, and everything that needs to be required for testing for space applications is done by them. And then on the other hand, we have the TÜV Information Technology, where I'm coming from. We are doing the testing of components for security evaluations, especially myself from the hardware component. So I'm looking at bank cards, passports, everything that is used as a microcontroller, secure microcontroller worldwide is doing in our labs. So I'm pretty sure everyone here has something in his pocket or in his wallet that was going through our labs. So you probably don't know information technology, but we are making a lot of things secure in the world, and probably a lot of things you are using. Yeah, so the next slide is, as I mentioned, quantum computers are a threat to cybersecurity in the future. There are 2 different approaches right now ongoing. One is exchanging the algorithms with new algorithms that are secure against quantum computers. So this is just, you can call it a replacement of the algorithms. It's a little bit more than that, but for this talk it's probably enough if you know that we exchange the algorithms that are based on a mathematical problem that is broken with some newer algorithms that are based on a different mathematic problem. The problem with that is that it started 2016 and it's still ongoing. So there are 3 algorithms right now in the standardization process. And during the evaluation of these newer algorithms, there was always a threat of breaking some of the algorithms that are now chosen. At the beginning, we started with 12 schemes broken, and right now we boil it down to 4. And even at the end, there are still some publications that threat the chosen algorithms. So when I made this slide, this was 2 weeks ago, there was a new paper for one of the problems for lattice space, which is the chosen new mathematical problem for the algorithms. And they thought they broke the algorithm or broke parts of it. The complete paper was withdrawn in the last week, so it's still secure, but we don't know what will happen in the future and what newer algorithms will come up that maybe break these new algorithms. So we all have this risk that the problems that we think are secure are not secure against quantum computers. And the next idea to secure, to have a secure exchange of keys is quantum key distribution. Different to the mathematical approach, this is more on physical laws. So as someone who doesn't know what QKD is or key distribution is, you can think about it as a way that there was communication between chips in the past. Like they talked with lights, frequency of lights, large light sections, smaller light sections, and they could communicate via light. And QKD is nothing less than this, but on a way smaller part. So it's not the whole light, it's more like a single photon, and in the photon there's decoded the secret bit, and with the bit there can be like a key exchange between 2 parties. Yesterday there was a talk from Airbus, I think, where he went into a little bit more detail about the different approaches and what they are doing. We started with evaluating QKD or looking at QKD as an alternative in the last year and now conducting multiple projects in this area. And we are thinking that a few use cases, especially space, can benefit from QKD and make good use of it. So for space, QKD is a great alternative. And it's the good thing about it, it's not based on a mathematical problem that is believed to be secure, but it's on physical law. So the security of the protocol itself is secure, but of course there are implementation things that needs to be considered. And that is what we did in the last year. So we had a big project that was by the German government of cybersecurity. They asked for a study about side channel attacks or implementation attacks on QKD devices. So it was not only the protocol itself that should be looked at, but more the implementation and what attack vectors are in a QKD system and the QKD components and what can we do. So we were a part of the project. Okay, first, what is even certification, how it's going? There are always three parties. First of all, it's a developer, so someone who is developing the QKD component, the QKD system, and wants to sell it. Then there's the certification body. In the German case, it's always the BSE. Here in France, it's NC, and in the Netherlands, it's NSCIP. So there's always someone who is responsible at the end for giving out the certificate. And there is the evaluation body, that could be us, that is doing the testing and then reporting to the certification body about the test results and declaring the scope, what needs to be tested, and so on. And in the end, this is always a talk between all the three parties. If the certification in the end is acknowledged and the product is then getting a certificate and can be sold with a certificate in mind. Yeah, QKD is different. So QKD is not only one thing you consider, it's different for all the protocols that are using. One of the simplest one is the prepare and measure protocol, where two parties communicate. This could be two satellites, a ground station with a satellite in space. And one party is decoding the information in the photons, and the other one is just measuring, and at the end they have an agreement on what bits do they use for the key and which not. The problem is there are way more different protocols, entanglement-based protocols, there are measurement-dependent, independent protocols, and all of these do completely work different and have different capabilities of use cases. So this is the easiest one to understand, and I'm going to present now a few attacks on the devices. Yes, this is the study I mentioned before. This is where the results, so this is also publicly available, so everybody who wants to have a look at the study can just Google it and read through it. In total, we worked with several international experts on the level of quantum hacking and on university level, so research level. And in total, we had around 50 possible attacks on QKD system and components. And they are all in this nice little study. Before you think you can go now and have an evaluation with the study, no, it's not meant as a scheme for an evaluation. It's more like an overview what attacks are possible and what attacks needs to be looked at as someone as a developer or user of QKD components and systems. Next slide is here. So before I go into really the attacks that we found, just an overview of what is even possible. So there are two vulnerabilities to QKD or to bad implemented QKD systems. One is a photon number splitting attack. One back. Okay, the animation is not working right. So the photon number splitting attack is nothing more than in the QKD system you talk with single photons. So you send a single photon from party A to party B, and no one can measure this photon without changing the state of it. So this is a security proof. When you send more than one photon from Alice to Bob, of course, an attacker can just capture a few of the photons, measure themselves, and then have the information about the key. So this is one of the vulnerabilities that needs to be considered. It's mostly captured by the protocol used or by the components, like the single photon sender. This needs to be a single photon, right? And there are some countermeasures against these attacks, and they are mostly covered and known. And then there's also the intercept and recent ascent. attack that is known as a man-in-the-middle attack. So if Eve knows what Alice is using as a basis, she can just measure the photon correctly and then reproduce it and send it over to the next party, so getting knowledge of the whole key. But it is also covered with the physical laws that working with QKD, so it's not that easy to do when it's implemented the correct way. And in the following slides, I'm going to show you a little bit of a bad implementation and how we interact, and then in the end can perform these attacks. Yes, so here are two attacks. They were published in the last year. So on the left is an attack on the post-processing of QKD devices. So after the photons were sent and measured, you can also then do some EM radiation of the components to see which state or which byte they measured. And you can see here clearly difference between the EM radiation depending on the bit or the secret that was sent over. So this attack was possible if you have access to the device and just measure the post-processing. On the right side, especially for free space QKD connections, there's an attack that you can just destroy some components inside a QKD system. If it's free space in satellite, you can shine light in, really strong light with a laser, and destroy, for example, the attenuator of the sender. And with the attenuator again, the device is probably sending out more than one photon. So if it's sending out more than one photon, you can then do, again, the number splitting attack. So there needs to be some countermeasures to protect the component, and that it's not so easy to fulfill this attack. Of course, for the attack on the left, you need physical access to the device. It's hard in space to get physical contact to the device, right? So this is maybe not an attack applicable to satellites. On the next one, a little bit in depth about another attack that is launchable on free space. This is not destroying something. This is just changing the characteristics of the laser diodes. So in this picture, here's the sender with 4 laser diodes for the 4 different states that they can send over. And as an attacker, I can then shine light again through the optical output normally of the sender and change the wavelength dependency of the laser diodes. So when I change the wavelengths of the different diodes, I can then measure the wavelengths of the sent photon and can distinguish between which diode sent out the photon, and with this information I know the state of the photon. With this attack, then I can already do the reset attack. So if I know the state that is sent off, I can measure it and I can copy it and send it to Bob. So man in the middle would not be known by the protocol because nobody knows that what I did. So not Alice knows that I'm there, Bob doesn't know that I'm there, and I'm setting the right photons. So every protocol-based countermeasures will not detect this attack, right? So there need to be some checks inside of Alice, some self-checks if the diodes are working correctly and have the right wavelengths. Right, so these are things that needs to be considered by any developer. And now maybe to the point why TÜVIT was in the study as well. All of these attacks were analyzed by our multiple experts we had on the national level. And we as the TÜV Information Technology were in this project to keep this very close to the certification. So giving it the right direction that it can be used in a certification later. And then I need a little bit background about certification. So when we test something for security, we never test it against, or we never prove that it's completely secure. You can never prove something to be secure against everything. So we always check against the potential attacker, or against the potential attacker potential. So who is a threat against the system, right? And if it's a smart card that is for paying in the traffic buses or something, it's not that much money on there. So it's an attacker is not getting so much out of it when it's hacking one of these. So the attack potential is lower than, for example, for a banking card, like a credit card, where a lot of money is on there. And even here, so we did some rating on the attack itself. So we decided on what equipment is used for the attack, what expertise is needed, how much access to the device is needed. So is it possible on a free space connection? Is it needed physical access to the devices? And that's what we did. So for every attack there, we did some of these tables where we decided what is needed to execute this attack and what is the benefit even was described in text form. So this can then be later used in an evaluation with a lot more research done. But if you read about it and then you think, oh, there was talking about something, attack potential, attack rating, this was done by us, and some interesting attacks were found that are executable very easy, and some of them do really need a lot of expertise, a lot of equipment. So what we're also doing, we are in a lot of committees nationally and internationally. So we are trying to speed up the progress of regulations, standardizations, and whatever is needed. So since we are expert in certification evaluation, we decided to use our knowledge and bring it to the different committees and decide where to go with QKD and where to go with cybersecurity in space, right? You probably know a lot of them, and we also, since we are coming from cybersecurity, we're on the classical committees as well. So seeing what is changing in the classical way, and then integrate it in the space security. So let's get to the last slide of the presentation. I told the presentation was called Certification in QKD. I wish I can tell you that you can already now certificate some QKD components. But you need the certification body, and in the last month, I think it was, there was a position paper by the leading European certification bodies, namely PSE, NC, the Netherlands scheme and the Swedish scheme. And in the end, they told that QKD is very interesting and has a lot of potential, but right now in the state it needs a lot more research, right? So it's not an alternative to PQC, and PQC should be the focus for classical cybersecurity, and for everything that is now migrating to post-quantum security, should firstly look at PQC before they go to QKD. And this is why we are agreeing on that thing, because QKD has a lot of downsides. It's not the fastest one. It needs a lot of dedicated connection lines. There's not enough research about attacks on it, and before I trust something that is so new, there need to be a lot more research. And we decided to actively do some research ourselves. So we are in 2 research projects founded by some German government, and we are building up a QKD test laboratory in the next 2 years so that we can perform some of the testing, do some research about side channel attacks or implementation attacks on QKD, and then use this information again to bring it back in the committees to build up standards, regulations, and bring this all forward. Yeah, and Alta is also building some QKD devices and working closely with us to bring in the expertise about space. So we together have a good overview of what we can bring to the cybersecurity in space topic. And this should be the last slide. Yes. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask or come over at the front or at our booth. We are at the end of the hall. Come discuss with us. We can tell you a little bit more about certification, standardization. Yeah, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Sven, for that really interesting presentation. That was great. As before, if anyone's got any questions, please do pop them online. I haven't got any so far. So are there any questions in the room? I can see one right at the back. I'm coming over to you.
Hello, nice presentation. My question is regarding the common criteria protection profile released by ETSI, and I think it was written by BSI, or at least supervised by them. And can you comment something about that protection profile?
Yeah, this protection profile is out of draft, I think, since last year. But it only covers like physical security to the data center and the station itself. So there's no real application to the QKD device itself. So there's no information about the system, the components and whatsoever. So it's only about physical security of the data center or ground station, wherever it's used. So it's a good starting point. But it's not the technology itself that can be evaluated with this. It's more like the system in a secure environment. Yeah. So it's a good starting point, but I don't think this will be enough for standardization of QKD systems and components especially.
Are there further questions? I can't. There is another. I'm coming over.
I'm not. I'm not sure exactly what I want to ask, but I know the Etsy profile, and I find the top-down approach an interesting one, because if we can agree that no one has physical access to the device, and you define your trust boundary, then you do not need to spend a lot of money to avoid side channel attacks that require you to have either direct access or to be able to active probing onto the thing. So you need to protect from the channel perspective, because the channel is outside. But I don't see how from component to component you can do composition, I think, just by adding these capabilities.
So I think component certification is really necessary because, first of all, you need some kind of random numbers. So the random numbers needs to be from a source that is random enough. So the random numbers should be certificated. And also, if you buy different components from different vendors, you never know what is really in this component. So for example, if you have a post-processing chip from, let's say China for bad case, but you don't know what they are doing with it, right? So there could be some malicious thing going on there, you don't know. So I think every component in such a system that is used in a high cybersecurity area needs to be secure and checked for. You cannot just take any component and build it into a high security thing and say it's secure because it's in a secure environment. The device itself needs to somehow be tested, right? Yeah.
I can see another question over here.
Yes, my question is more generic for you. Today, QKD is mainly, it was firstly trained at ground level, channel level. Now we are assessing QKD also through satellites. So as we are checking physical mechanics, let's say physics, so does it change something in your way to certificate, if it's only at ground level or if it's also using satellites?
I think it's the same because it's the same technology in the end. We will test it.
It won't change the attacks, or it's or the opportunity or the equipment and knowledge?
The opportunity probably in the equipment, because
be
drones
different.
will be cheaper, so you can have access to probably more of them, and you get your hands on them. Because when the satellite is in space, I cannot get that and test it on the device itself. If it's drones, maybe I get a hands on some of the drones and then do some testing beforehand before I attack the real drones in the field, right? So the access to it, it's much easier, but the attacks itself won't change. So the equipment is the same, probably. It's the same system. The expertise needed is the same. It's probably more about getting the access to the devices.
Thank you for another interesting question. Are there any other further questions before we wrap this session up? Final chances? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sven, for that brilliant presentation.